Hi, this is Michael Keeter with Influential Dental. I'm the co-host with Julianne O'Connor. Great to see you, Julianne, and a special guest, Dr. Robert Stanley. So thank you, Dr. Stanley, for being here. And Julianne, will you please say a few words about Dr. Stanley?
Yeah, well, I'm super excited to have you on the show today, Dr. Stanley. You and I have gotten to know each other over the last year in really cool ways, and you have an unbelievable background. I mean, just just if you look at your title alone, there's no way I could even tell you what everything means on it. But you come from, an engineering background. And I think this is what most intrigues me about you is the way you teach, the way you approach helping other doctors in this industry. Comes from a really different way of looking at things that just makes so much sense. I'll just leave with this tidbit and then turn it over to you to give a little bit of your background. But I just remember when I heard you training at one of the institutes, or actually at an event, and I remember the actual videographer saying, I feel like I can do this now. And I was like, yeah, you leave people feeling like we can do anything. But welcome to the show. So excited to have you here. Tell us a little bit about some of that background and where you're at today.
Well, guys, thank you so much for having me on. It's true, I do have an engineering degree, but before everybody turns off the podcast, please understand we want to take the concepts of engineering, and what we want to do is we want to bring it down to an understandable level, and just use the concepts in a way that helps us reduce risk and improve outcomes for our patients. And quite honestly, Julianne, the comment you got from that person is not the first time that I've gotten that comment from the AV guys. So the AV guys are in the back, they do the setup and they set up the cameras, and then when they're done and everybody's leaving, they come up to me and they go, "I understood everything you said." And to me, that's probably the biggest compliment I could get from anyone, is taking someone who has no understanding of engineering other than maybe audio and video, and no understanding of dentistry, and walk away after a presentation and say, I understood those concepts and how they can be impactful in people's lives. And it makes me feel very good when I can communicate my message in that effective way.
Well, I mean, ironically, I felt the same way. I felt like I could go practice some dentistry after that. Mike, did you get
Good.
to
All right,
hear Dr. Stanley at
well,
ADI's event?
I did, and being in the industry for almost 18 years, I concur. Very refreshing, very calming, very assuring. Not only to your colleagues and others that have been in dentistry for a long time, but like you said, the AV person or me as well, who haven't practiced dentistry but have been in a lot of surgery. So I agree. Just your demeanor and your story, which we'll get into more. And if you haven't met a rocket scientist, you've met one today with Dr. Robert Stanley, and I'm sure we can dive into that a little bit more. But I agree with you wholeheartedly,
Yeah, so you're
Julian.
you're kind of known in the industry, right, for really specifically implant dentistry and how you're one of those few guys who just doesn't have failures, and doesn't, or certainly not a lot if you have any. And then obviously you're training and teaching on bone grafting and other things as well. You have your own institute, the Stanley Institute. There's so much to you. There's like so many directions we could go with this show, actually. And so let's just kick it off with, what are some of the highlights right now in your career? What are some of the things you're working on? What are you excited about? I know a few of them, but I'm going to turn it to you to share a little bit of that, and then we'll just see where this goes, and then maybe deep dive into some of the challenges you've overcome.
Okay. So let me start off by saying I do have failures. Okay. Because if anyone's listening to this and we start off with the premise, you have no failures, then everyone knows that's not possible. But I would probably categorize the vast preponderance of my failures that I have in my practice are failures to integrate. So that's we place the implant and it doesn't stay in the bone, it doesn't heal. And in the vast preponderance of those cases, it's because of the patient. I hate to put the blame on them, but oftentimes when they come back, they tell me, listen, I wasn't able to stop smoking like I said I was going to do. And they're honest with me. And I appreciate that, because as dentists, when we have a failure, we're looking for that answer. We don't want to be left in the dark. We want to know, why did this one fail? And so when these patients come back and they're very honest with me, they say, listen, I wasn't able to eat a soft diet, and I was chewing on that anterior provisional crown day one, biting through, a French baguette, like, and you're like, okay, so we have a real strong um, contender for the reason why that implant failed. So the vast preponderance of failures are failures to integrate. I have very little failures after that. So, and the main reason is that we have a unique mm, a unique process. We call it the method, and it's not me, it's not my hands or my eyes or anything like that. It's just the method that, if everyone who follows the method has just incredible success. And the fun thing about the method is that when they start, they literally, the students that have come through the university, the institute rather, and they start doing these cases, they send me a text and they go, I can't believe how easy that was. I mean, there's just like, that was so easy. This is really not that complicated. And I go, that's right. So we bring it down and we make it really simple. Now, the interesting thing about it, and that can lead to where we're going with this, is that when I generate content for publication, it has to go to, say, for instance, a peer review committee. And what I found is that many of my publications have not made it past the editor's desk, even sometimes, where they just say, you know what, I don't subscribe to those beliefs. And so if I can just take a second to explain what I believe is going on, it might help people. And so if you take someone who's an editor, typically that's at the end of your career. You usually don't graduate and then turn into an editor right away. You usually you have to cut your teeth, right, so to speak. You have to go out there and do dentistry for a while and get good at it. And then at the end of your career, let's say after 30 or 40 years, then you have the retirement funds are already set up, and you have the bandwidth to actually take on an editor's position.
By the way, you're
Okay.
never getting past the editor's desk now.
Yeah.
Well, no, and what's refreshing, Dr. Stanley and Joanne, I'm sure you'll agree, is the transparency. And you brought that up when you're talking to your patients. I'm sure you talk to them about success and failure depends on you owning it and not smoking or not eating things you shouldn't eat. But like you're saying as well, is owning it, being transparent to our audience. And so I think that's refreshing. That's what we're about, is not only providing influence, but being transparent. I think that's key in dentistry, and it's refreshing at your level as well.
Yeah, so carry
Thank
on.
you.
I'm sorry I interrupted you, and then
No, it's quite
Mike
all right.
Mike takes my interruptions and runs with them. So
Um, my father was a U.S. Army Ranger, and if there's one thing that he taught me, and he taught me many things, he taught me to have impeccable character. And character is what you do when no one's looking. That's a nice little simple definition. It's what I taught my children. It's what my father taught me. And so when I talk about these things, I'm being honest and genuine and transparent. There's nothing to hide. I'm just telling you my experiences. And if it's science, I'll tell you this is science, but I'll make a very big distinction between the two. And I don't like to muddle the two. So back to the editor issue is imagine you're an editor. You've been doing implants for 3 decades. And then someone comes along and submits a paper that says, we can do it better, or we don't have those kinds of failures if you do it this way. Well, it's somewhat of a slap in the face, isn't it? Because they go, who is this guy? Like, who does he think he is? He's writing a paper saying he can get better outcomes. And so it's been a little bit challenging to get some of the concepts in front of the industry, because what happens is it doesn't get published. And that's not to say all of them, because we've had 6 or 7 publications and they've been impactful. And so they're getting out there. But what we've decided to do, and this has been a monumental undertaking, and partly with your help, Julianne, is we've decided to actually publish a book. And by publishing the book, I can ensure that these concepts can be put to paper, and that people can have access to the concepts, and then they can make their own decisions based on what they're reading as to whether or not this makes sense or whether or not it can help. So that's what has been somewhat time all consuming in the last 9 months or so, which is building up to getting that done.
yeah, so I'm so excited about your book. First and foremost, I'm thrilled that you're taking on that undertaking. One of the things that I have found to be interesting in this industry is I really consider you just one of the most incredible clinicians for so many reasons, that's out there in the industry. But there's a lot of controversy. Like you get met with people who, and I don't know if it's similar to what you're seeing with the editor's desk or not. But tell us a little bit about that, and what you're up against in the industry, and is it similar? And also, how are you dealing with that currently at this place in your career? Because I'm sure in the beginning it's a little bit, frustrating, and could make a lot of people just say, forget it. Why am I trying so hard to help him, leave this wisdom with people?
That's a very, very accurate assessment of how I feel at times, because I feel like I have a PhD in mechanical and aerospace engineering. Then I worked in telecom for 10 years, and then I went to dental school. And so when I was in dental school, it was time to find what part of dentistry I liked the most, and I fell into surgery because if you know anything about engineers and surgeons, they're basically the same, this two sides of the same coin. They're very similar in terms of how they approach problem solving. And so that was very interesting for me to continue my career in that. My wife said, "Enough school, 17 years of college, you're done." Okay, so I was out of school, but nevertheless, I've taken my engineering and I've applied it to one of the most important engineering solutions that we do in dentistry, which is implants. And people really have a tendency not to give this much thought, but if you just think about a dental implant and the solution that you put on top of it, which would be, say, an abutment and a crown or an all-on X kind of solution, they are they are heavily, heavily weighted by mechanical engineering principles, like the basic principles of what we're talking about. And if you stop for a second, you go, "Oh, yeah, you're right." And you say, "Well, I've been trained by biologically trained people." So if your university has got professors and they're all teaching at the university and they were biology majors and then they went to dental school and then they got their masters in perio, it's all biological, right? It's the vast preponderance of that knowledge resides in the biological. So when we say things like torque, stress, strain, modulus of elasticity, toughness, strength, abutment, cantilever, all of those words are going to resonate with everyone watching this that's in the dental industry, and they all start in engineering. They don't start in dentistry. We're borrowing those terms they've been around for thousands of years, right? But not in dentistry. They've been around thousands of years in engineering. And so if you think about it, to complement someone's education, wouldn't it be nice to have someone talk about those things in a way that really affect the bottom line for your patient by, as we said, reducing risk and improving outcomes? And that's what we're working towards. That's what we're driving towards, is to try to figure out a way to take this knowledge and share it. And it is frustrating because I do get a lot of resistance. And let's be very clear. The people I'm getting resistance from, they're not wrong. Okay. They just don't know
Hmm.
what they don't know, right? That colloquial term, they don't know what they don't know. So what I'm saying is, if you have someone, like I said, 30 or 40 years of experience, they know exactly what they know. What they don't know is why, of the failures that they've had, there may be a very obvious low hanging solution that they've never been exposed to. And I'll give you an example. I had my full arch course was just last week. I had a clinician who's been practicing 41 years. He
Wow.
was doing implants. He trained under Brandemart, he trained under Mish, he trained under the greats, right? 41 years, 4 decades. He placed subperiosteal blade implants. Okay, he's been doing it forever. He's come to the class 3 times and he 3 times in a row.
Yeah.
And he says, "This is the best implant class I've ever been to." Now, you have to ask yourself, why would someone say that with that much experience? You might say, "Well, how is that possible?" Because I'm answering the problems that he's had for 41 years that he never got an answer from the biological side of things. They're
Yeah.
from the mechanical side of things. And he's like, "Aha, I remember Susan, and Susan had that complication. Now I know why." And once you have that moment of the epiphany, once you have that epiphany, go, "That's why I've been having these problems." And the minute you realize that, those problems go away
Yeah.
because you just eliminate that from your treatment modality and they just go away.
For
And
sure.
so you say now you're really getting great outcomes, which doesn't comply with what people who haven't had the training would experience. They'd say, "You can't do it. It doesn't
Right.
work that way." And you go, "Yeah, you can. You just got to know something that you don't know yet."
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious. Okay, so you've got some people who are seasoned coming through your courses. I know you're out there on stages all over speaking about this stuff, but oftentimes on stages it's not a full blown course. How are you attracting new dentists, and what kind of advice would you give to newer dentists coming in and just beginning their journey? How do we get them in front of you to learn some of this and have them be contributors to what they're experiencing without all of that sort of jaded perspective on, how it has to be done.
Yeah. We don't want them to wait 40 years, Dr. Stanley. We
Right.
want to make sure if they're right out of dental school, they need to come see you because dentistry is unlike any other industry. I mean, you always got to learn, you always got to evolve. And so that's interesting. You say that someone 41 years is still learning, and everyone
Right.
should go and
Um,
continue to learn wherever they're at in their practice.
that's right. So the um, the young people, it's interesting because what happens with the young people is that they haven't had the problems. And so I'm giving them a solution to a problem they haven't experienced yet. And they don't know the magnitude of the power that I'm instilling on them. So they might think when they first get out of dental school that dental implant training is a commodity. So all of the big, all of the big institutes across the country that somehow that they are a commodity. And I'm here to tell you they are not a commodity. They are not a commodity. If you just listen to what comes out of certain institutes, they all have their different ways of looking at things, right? So you get a different mix of education. The struggle that I have is that when they're in the class and their mind is a blank slate, and I give them a solution to a problem they've never had, they're falling asleep. They need a cup of coffee. They don't get it, right? When you have somebody that's got experience, maybe even just 5 or 6 years of experience, and they've had some failures, and they've gone home at night and they go, I don't know why that failed.
Yeah.
They weren't smoking, they weren't chewing on it, they were taking vitamin D, everything looked like it was in place, everything the implant was really beautifully placed, I had good stability, and then it fails, and I tell you what, dentists hate failures. Like it eats at us on the inside like an acid, right? So we hate that. And so when you live like that and you've had those problems, and all of a sudden someone says, "Have you ever seen this kind of problem?" And in the mind, you don't ask them to actually raise their hand in the class because that would be embarrassing, right? So you just say, "In your mind, have you ever seen this problem?" And they're going in their mind, they're going, I've seen that 3 or 4 times." And you go, "It's likely because of this." And they go, "What?" So they
Yeah.
just light up. They're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm not gonna do that again." And so that's my struggle with the younger folks is that they don't understand the value of the education they're getting. They won't even be able to understand that initially until they have a couple of issues. And so when they have a few issues, then it starts to really resonate with them.
Yeah, so that's why you're ending up with the more seasoned people coming
Yeah.
in and,
Yeah.
they're trying to troubleshoot really.
Yeah.
You're known as the smile engineer, right? I mean, I think you have
Correct.
one of your social media handles at least is that, right? At smile engineer, is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. On Instagram, Smile
Yeah.
Engineer. Yeah.
And so do you find that people are coming to you and requesting private mentorship or trying to get your advice one on one, or are people just signing up for the classes? Like, how are people, getting to you, with all of these issues? Because we're seeing it more and more with failures, especially with issues around full arch and
Right.
the whole thing. So I
Right.
presume that we got to figure out, besides you being on stages, like, what's the approach? What do people do? Do they need to just go to your website? Can they
Yeah.
follow you on social and get enough info to help them? And
Yeah. So we have two main outlets for our content. The longer form content, which I would call anywhere between 5 to 10 minute videos, is on our YouTube channel under Stanley Institute. And that's where you're going to get these kinds of concepts broken down into with a little bit more meat, a little bit more substance. And then on our Instagram handle, we have mostly shorts, of course, right? Shorts and reels, things under a minute. And those are kind of like they're teasers. But what we attempt to do is within 60 minutes. And if you've been listening for a few minutes, you realize I have the gift of gab. So you're like, how does that guy get anything across in 60 seconds? But on the Instagram is where you're going to get the little teasers. And then hopefully what they do is they go link in bio and they jump over to the YouTube. Now, I do have a very strong following internationally. About 75% of my YouTube followers are international. And I find that very interesting. Um, and I don't have a reason for it. I really don't have any idea why that is. but I also get very good engagement from everybody across the board. And one place I get engagement is with perio residents. So this is an opportunity. So what's happening in the universities is the perio students they're doing their residencies, right? They're learning about periodontal, and what they get is they get the same story that the professors have always told, right? Because they've been doing it a long time. So here's the same story, and those people, if they're open minded, when they come to my channel, they're really enlightened because they go, oh wow, this is a very pragmatic, practical way to approach solutions for tooth replacement therapy versus maybe the more constructed form that they're in at the university. And so now they have a way to kind of bounce ideas around inside their head as to how they're going to take care of their patients. So we do have that. And I would love for those younger students to share it amongst themselves because they're really well connected on social networks. So sharing that would be very helpful to try to get that message out in front of younger people. As Michael said, we'd love to have more of the younger people because I'm getting up there and I don't know how many more years. I got to get this book done before I die
Okay, so we're
because I
going to
don't know how
talk
many more
about
years
yeah. So let
I've
me.
got before I'm
I'm
gone.
I want to jump tracks for a second. So, you're on stages all over. I can understand why people internationally are following you because you're actually traveling and speaking internationally quite a bit. And so it makes sense to me that word travels. Plus, people are looking to, great, educators here in the US, obviously from other countries. But how do you balance everything that you're doing? You're running an institute, you've got all this social, you really are an influencer, not just in the space of dentistry, but really for a lot of other reasons. I think people are looking to you right now as well, just from a lifestyle standpoint. You're married to the most gorgeous woman who is also an aesthetic dentist who is also training. So, how do you balance all of that? You have children, you have, and you look like you're having the best lifestyle of anybody out there. So, why? What is the secret?
Well, I'll have to say that the number one reason why I'm doing all that I'm doing right now is 100% the people around me. And I have to give credit to the people around me, and part of that is my selection and my doing, right? So, you know the colloquial term, surround yourself with good people, and you'll do good things, right? Surround yourself with bad people, and you have a tendency to do bad things. So I've really gone about in my life ever since I was young, trying to surround myself with people that could help me, could educate me, could guide me, love me, and care for me. And so starting off with my wife, of course, she selected me. I did not select her. Let's be very clear about that. She picked me out of the crowd, and I'm very grateful for that because Dr. Bobby and we're very different. I'm a fact finder. Okay, so NASA scientist, fact finder, right? My wife is what we call is a quick start, right? A quick start is someone like in the movie Old School, and he goes, "Let's go streaking," and he takes off running naked down the street, right? That's my wife, okay? She's a quick start. She's willing to do anything at any moment. If you said, "Let's go to Italy tomorrow," and she'd be like, she wouldn't think, how much is the flight or I've got an obligation on Monday. She'd just say yes. And she's like, I'm in because it sounds like a good time. So that's my wife. Well, the beautiful thing about our relationship is that we balance each other. And so where she could get in trouble from jumping off a cliff before verifying that there's water at the bottom of the cliff, I'm the guy checking to make sure there's water. Okay. On the other side, I would be much more inclined to sit with a cup of coffee on the back porch working on my book for the rest of my life. And she's like, get up, let's go do something fun for her. So, because I like writing the book, but nevertheless, you see that it balances out nicely. So we were very wise that over 30 years ago, we got together and the complementary nature of our personality seems to work really well for us. But it doesn't stop there. So my team and my private practice is 25 people strong. And then in the Institute, we have 4 people working through the Institute. And so all of these people are supporting these endeavors. So with the private practice and with the institute. And then the last thing is that I wasn't able to actually give back to the community in this effective way with education until my kids were out of the house. And so I have 4 biologic and 1 foster child, and they all went off to school once they were out of the house. And we have the last one is a senior in college. He's graduating this year, but all of them are older than that. They're all out on their own. And it wasn't until that point that you could actually allocate this kind of time. And I don't encourage anyone in their earlier part of their career to attempt to do that. What I would encourage you to do is hone your skills, get good at it. If you have an intention in doing this later in life, take all the photographs and videos of the cases that you're experiencing now, build that repertoire, but then when the kids are gone, then start teaching, because it's too much to do when you've got to take the kids to soccer practice. It's just too much. It's overwhelming. And then you're going to have a struggle. And the struggle is going to be with the kids, it's going to be with the spouse. It's not a good place, in my opinion. I would really encourage people not to take on this burden until later in life if they're so inclined to do it.
Well, what I was going to say is what I appreciate about you, Dr. Stanley, and what I believe in, and Julianne as well, is about surrounding yourself with the right people and doing good, being good. And that's part of why we're doing this podcast, is not only about influential people within the dentistry field, but good people, people that work hard, do good work. We need to also have fun. We need to have balance. But I do agree with you. It's about surrounding yourself with the right people professionally, personally, and just in general, period. And then all boats can rise, right? And we can gather and get things from other people. So thank you for sharing that. And knowing you just for a little while, I see that. And, I got to spend some time with you at one of these events, and you got to let our hair down a little bit and dress up as cowboys and, talk about some things. So, I appreciate your, and the audience I'm sure does as well, is not only what you bring to the table when it comes to dentistry and your pragmatic approach, coming from an engineering background, but that's important to surround yourself with good people and also do more than just, dentistry, have a life outside of it as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
speaking of doing more than dentistry, okay, this is going back to dentistry, but can you tell our listeners about some of the companies that you have? I mean, you have another company that I think a lot of people don't know about, and I think one of your sons is working with it as well. And so, do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Oh, absolutely. So we have a company called Bright Gums, and if you go to brightgums.com, you can see the website. And I would encourage everyone to just click on that site and go to the gallery and just look at the before and afters, because it's going to be somewhat um, mind blowing as I try to describe this to you. But it's an elective cosmetic procedure for pinkening of gums. So this is an elective procedure. It's cosmetic, so it's not for periodontal disease. It's for people who have pigmented gums who want pink gums. And it works really, really well. It is literally been designed from the ground up to solve this problem. So it's not a solution, for instance, it's not a chemical-based solution where you put acid on the gums. It's not a mechanical debridement with either scraping, cutting, or grinding, or sandblasting. It's not laser, it's not light energy. None of those things really work really well. And that's why the industry doesn't have a solution for this until Bright Gums came along. And what Bright Gums uses is it uses a patented process with radio energy right? And you basically get the patient numb and you take a brush that looks somewhat like an eraser and you just erase across the gums. It takes a couple minutes to do the procedure, and within a week their gums are pink. And it's really hard to describe. So I would really encourage you to check out the website for Bright Gums. You can spell it either way; it'll take you there. We got both URLs, so however you spell it, you'll get there. And
Yeah,
look
and
at
you
some of
have
the photos.
Yeah, I mean, you have celebrities coming to you. I've got a doctor who's so thrilled right now who works out of Beverly Hills, and she's so thrilled to have this now as an option. I know she's trying to reach you because she's like, I got to get trained. You do need to train people on it, correct? So that they
That's
don't hurt
correct.
somebody. And so you offer classes. Can they do that remotely?
Not yet. So what we're
Okay.
doing right now is we're doing them in-person courses. So when we first invented this idea and we came up with it, we did histological testing at the University of Chapel Hill, Carolina, and we realized it was working. It was working very effectively. We realized there's two ways to approach this business model. One is to keep it to myself, and everyone around the world has to fly here to get it, or to share it with dentists around the world so it becomes a common practice in all offices, so that people that are struggling with their aesthetics, with their how they view themselves, just like with crooked teeth or yellow teeth, we do braces and whitening. Now you can do gum pinkening. And so we said, we're going to train doctors. There's no way I'm keeping this to myself. We got to share the love. So we're training doctors. They become authorized providers in their town. They're included in all of the marketing paraphernalia, as well as, they're on the website lookup. So somebody finds brightgums.com. They go there, they say, Chicago, they type in the zip code for Chicago, and boom, they get the doctor in Chicago, so to speak. So but those doctors have to come here to get trained, because we really need to do a hands-on with them.
How do you address this? Because I completely loved how you shared with me, that for some people, this is, it's taking away something that's very natural and very beautiful to other people, right?
Right.
It's very much a personal choice, but how do you address that if it's controversial in some regards?
Yeah. What we've gotten since we invented this was we've gotten some people that have said, look, you're making the problem. They say you're creating the problem for people, and that is the last thing that anyone would wanna do. We don't wanna create a problem for someone, so we don't tell people who have pigmented gums. Now, pigmented gums come in basically two flavors. You have, blotchy gums, where they have just spots, almost like freckles or moles across their gums, and then you just have uniform colored gums, okay? So they can range from pink all the way to dark. And so either one of those, we've treated both of those cases. They can both be treated, but it's typically something that the patient has noticed their entire life. So when I interview these people before they come in, I ask them, tell me about your journey. How did you come to find out about it? And you go, I've been looking for a solution since, Dion, as our former NFL football player. He said, I've been looking for a solution since I was 11. And so I said, "Well, how could someone who's 11 all the way to a full-grown man not get an answer?" Well, the answer is very simple. You go to your dentist, you say, "Can you do anything about this?" And the dentist goes, "There's nothing wrong with your gums. They're healthy." But remember, the World Health Organization's definition of health is not simply the mere absence of infirmity. It's mental and social well-being as well. And that's the part that a lot of clinicians drop off. We think our job is to do fillings, right? We're going to take care or manage perio, right? We're going to take care of the two main diseases in the mouth. But our job is also to make sure that they are emotionally stable and happy too. So when someone comes to me and says, I don't like this look, now we have a solution. But for God's sake, our goal is not to push this on people. Our intent is not to say, because Bright Gums is gaining traction in the market, now everybody should go out and get this done. That's not it. If you're happy with the way you look, and I don't care how you look, I don't care if you're short, tall, squatty, muscular, not muscular, it doesn't matter. Be happy with who you are, and that's great. But if you want to make a change, and you want to do tooth whitening to get white teeth, if you want to do braces to straight teeth, now you have an opportunity to get pink gums. And I think it's really amazing. We have a lot of people, when they come here and get this service, they cry. Or literally they cry when they see their gums, because they've been suffering and hiding the smile. Imagine going through the holiday season, which is coming up shortly, and guarding your smile the entire time at the dinner table with your family. You're laughing, and you're guarding your smile because you don't like your smile. That's something, as dentists, we don't want anyone to have to suffer through.
Well, and Dr. Stanley, what you mentioned, I mean, just think about before implants came about. People are probably saying the same thing about implants. Oh, you don't need those implants. You can just use a denture, or you can just use, a bridge. And it's like, no, we have things now that can treat it. Or again, what if there's pigment issues on other parts of your body, on your face, or other things that you want to take care of? Why is it in the mouth so unique and we can't touch it there? So I think you're offering a great service. It's about the mental game of dentistry as much as the practical, physical, as we, being in the industry for such a long time. So, I applaud you for giving patients choices. And I say that's the same thing with implants and anything else. People just should be open to what the patients want in their well being, not just to fill a space.
Yep.
Yeah, agreed, agreed. So, we always like to leave listeners with, a couple of tidbits on, something, maybe that you can share with them about, you know, perhaps your philosophy on really approaching your career. And I know you're, at this place in your career where you're really starting to give back. But if you could give listeners a piece of advice, you could share with new dentists coming out and into the industry, a piece of advice, whether it's about lifestyle, whether it's about the actual clinical side, what would be some advice that you might leave with listeners today?
Oh, I'd be happy to. So the main thing that I would encourage younger dentists as they come out is that um, let me back up. Most dentists are your gunners, right? They're hard drivers. They went through school. They had to get good grades to get into dental school. They had to get good grades coming out of dental school. They're hard driving people. So what I see happen a lot of times is when they first get out of dental school, they're still taking that hard drive mentality, but they're darn near killing themselves. And what I mean by that is they're taking so many courses in so many different areas so fast that it's hard to actually implement them in an effective way. So my first thing that I would encourage young dentists when they get out is just do your general dentistry, but pick one area that you want to really get good at. So say for instance you want to get really good at periodontal surgeries, and then go visit Dr. Pat Allen down in Texas and take his continuum, take his courses, and implement them, and make sure you spread a little time in between the classes. So don't take them back to back in 2 weekends because you haven't had enough time to implement the first course in your practice. Implement them and get really good at those procedures. Then take the second class, get really good at those procedures. And then once you feel like you've kind of mastered the level, whatever that level is for you that you feel comfortable with, then say, okay, now I'm going to learn how to do Invisalign. I'm going to go into the orthodontic space and learn how to do that. So bite off pieces at a time and take some time to get good at it. And depending on on how much, time you have to allocate towards it, you might be good at something in 6 months. You might be like, after 6 months of doing this procedure, I feel really good about it. And now I can take something else on. So just don't bite off too much too early is the first thing that I'd have to say.
Love that piece of
The
advice.
second thing, yeah, thank you. The second thing I would say is that I would really encourage people to read as much as possible. And the reason is that when I go to trade shows and I hear the greats, we'll call them the greats. Everybody knows who the greats are, right? And you hear the greats talking from the podium. Because we know they're the greats, they come with a certain level of authority. And when they say it's blue, nobody questions it. They go, it's blue. He said, he said it's blue. We know who he is. Everybody believes it's blue. What I've found though is that when we're on stage as human beings, and this doesn't have to do with anybody being great or not great, but we have a tendency to have a stage presence. And sometimes the stage presence will say, it's all blue versus it's mostly blue. And the difference is huge. The subtle difference between it's all blue or it's mostly blue is huge. And where you can really find those little nuances is only in the literature. You have to read the literature. So when I'm at a trade show and a doctor says, if you use this technique, say for instance, the height of the abutment. So if you use a taller abutment, you're going to get better wound healing around your implant. I'm taking a picture of that reference and I'm reading that reference. I'm going to pull that reference up and I'm going to read it for myself. Because if you don't do that, you may be fooled into doing something that you thought you heard, which isn't exactly what the doctor who's speaking meant. They just kind of got excited. The word choice wasn't quite right. And it led you to believe that that solution is maybe more impactful than it really is. So that would be my second thing is make sure you continue reading and understand this. Dentistry is evolving at a pace right now that's it's never evolved as fast as it is right now. I mean, it is flying. Sprint Ray just came out with a printer that you can print a crown in 9 minutes, 8 minutes, 8 minutes, 8 minutes. Print a crown in 8 minutes. You can print 3 unique crowns on the same device in 8 minutes. So you say to yourself,
Incredible.
well, why is that so important? Well, if you've got a mill like a Cirac mill, you can't simultaneously mill 3 crowns. So at best, you're milling sequentially. So you have to mill, wait, reload, mill, wait, reload, mill, right? So it's a game changer, and it's only going to get better. If we're at 8 minutes today, guess what we're going to be next year? I mean, you can't stop learning is the third point I'm trying to make here. Is that the minute you stop learning, to think that you got out of dental school and you know everything you need to know about dentistry, that would be a travesty for you and your patients. It is just the beginning of your journey, and encourage everybody to just go out there and learn as much as you can.
Yeah, I love that. So, from an innovation standpoint, you also, I mean, there's so much stuff, right? You're an inventor, you've got all kinds of things that you're working on, but you're also coming out with, I think you're writing a paper right now, or you just wrote a paper that proves some things that dentists have been saying, weren't that important for a long time, but you've used some very simple ways of proving otherwise, that it's extremely important, that it has a tremendous effect on the outcome. Do you want to share anything about that, or is that are we waiting until that comes out in research?
No, I'd rather share. It is. I'm putting the final touches on two separate papers right now,
Okay.
and they are going to be. They're going to be. They'll. If you read them, they'll change the way you do the way you practice dentistry. And the first one is on primary stability. So we authored in 2020, in March of 2020. Imagine that, right when COVID hit. Nobody read the paper. It's the most impactful paper in all of dentistry, I'd like to say, but nobody read it because everybody was afraid we're going to die. It was on how to predict primary stability. And at that point, it was a process that I'd been doing in my practice for a number of years, and almost like Sir Isaac Newton inventing calculus and not sharing it with anyone because he didn't think it was that important. I invented this way to predict primary stability that I was using in my practice until one day one of my friends said, you should probably share that with the rest of the community. I said, oh, yeah, I guess you're right. So I wrote it up, and it was a theory piece, right? So it was a proposition, and I put it out there. And so as soon as I was writing it, I realized what I need to do is I need to collect the data. So I spent the last couple of years collecting the data. The data is done. So we just process the data, and we now have unequivocal scientific evidence to prove how any clinician can predict primary stability into fresh extraction sockets. Imagine the power. All you have to do is follow the method, and you'll be able to predict primary stability. Like, people are like, how do you do that? It's in the paper. So, but the number, the p value. So the p value, the smaller the p value, the more impactful it is. It's 0.00003. So it's like
It's pretty
any
small.
yeah, yeah. Anything lower than 0.05 is considered statistically significant, right? So it's just like, it's almost too good to be true. Thank goodness we had a couple of cases that didn't go well, so we could actually have something better than, like, yeah, it just works. So that's the
Yeah.
first one, and then the second one we're working on is torque, which is one of my controversial topics. Um, Torque is not a good indicator of primary stability, which just shocks people because that's really what people have been using for years. Is they'll say, "What was your primary stability?" And what they're really saying is, "What was your torque?" As if the two words are interchangeable, and they are 100% not interchangeable. And once we show you that data, you'll be shocked, because you can have low torque and high stability, and you can have high torque and low stability, and people don't understand that. So that's going to be a game changer, because people have been so fixated on the concept of torque for so long. It's been ingrained. People don't even talk about it anymore. It's just it's part of the everyday life in dentistry that torque is stability, and it's not. So that paper is almost done too. We're just putting the final graphics together for that one. So they'll both be coming out real soon. And like I said, hopefully they'll be able to change dentistry, because once you realize some of these controversial ideas, it changes how you treat your patients. It really does.
Yeah, we're gonna have to have you back on, obviously, because there's so much knowledge. And again, being in the industry, and especially in the implant industry for as long as I have, I mean, I'm learning, and my wheels are spinning in my head, and I'm excited to look at your publications. And I know most, or if not all, of our listeners and people who are watching this podcast will as well. So thank you for just knowledge packed. Program today, but we'll definitely have to have you back, because we need to also, in another episode, because we're out of time, I want to find what you do for fun and what you like to go out and do other than just work, work, work. And I'm sure you find a lot of joy in your books and so on. But yeah, it's amazing. And I know all of our listeners and watchers will really enjoy what they're hearing today. But yeah, how do folks get to you and learn more about this? And when will your book come out, and when will these publications come out as well?
So the easiest way to get in touch with me is through the website. So stanleyinstitute.com. By the way, if you go to stanleyinstitute.com and you go about us, there is a tag. There's a link there to publications. So any of the publications that I mentioned today that we've already published, they're all free to download for you. So if you go there, you can download these papers and read them yourself. Also, our course offerings, there's basically two main course offerings in implants. There is your onesie twosies, so implants in the aesthetic zone and immediate implants. So that's your introductory courses, so to speak. And then we have the full arch course. So those are your two main courses. If you complete that entire continuum, you will actually have enough credits to be a member of the fellowship in the ICOI, International Congress for Oral Implantology, which is always important to have credentials behind your name. So that is where you can go for that. On Instagram, the Smile Engineer, for all the short stuff, and then for the little bit longer content, it would be the Stanley Institute on YouTube, and that's where you're going to get
Amazing.
the more meat.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Dr. Stanley.
It's been my pleasure, guys. Thank you so much.